And hello, Hearts of Oak. I'm delighted to have Matt Schlapp joining us once again. Matt, thank you so much for your time today.
Great to be with you again, Peter.
Great to have you. And obviously, you can follow Matt. There is his Twitter handle. And obviously, CPAC, chair of CPAC. And before I get into, we're recording this just 2 days before it goes out. We're recording it hours before the debate between I don't know what to call Kamala Harris anymore, and President Trump. And I want to get into campaign. We've got 8 weeks to go, and all to play for. But you've just come back, CPAC. You've just come back from Mexico. Maybe you want to fill us in. What was that like? CPAC has gone country to country and seems to get bigger and bigger every year, in influence, in reach worldwide, not only in the US. But tell us what Mexico was like.
It was fabulous. Mexico is a very special place. The American people read a lot about the bad side of Mexico, which is the border and the cartels and the corruption and the left-wing bent of the presidents. But if you can get beyond that, it's an amazing country filled with really lovely, hospitable people. Mexico City is so much larger than any of our big cities and so much more functional. I think it's more than 15 million people. It's a lot of people. It's a lot more than 15 million if you take the suburbs. And, so it's kind of twice as big as any of our big cities. And our cities just, look so disgusting and smell bad and are just such a mess. It's so sad. So we had a great trip. But I think the thing for conservatives, what they would love the most about the CPAC in Mexico City is it becomes a convener for the whole area of the globe. And that area of the globe is really fighting communism tooth and nail and trying so hard to build a new approach to winning these elections. That Javier Milei has obviously had success in Argentina, and the Bolsonaros had that wonderful 4 years in power in Brazil, and they're trying to come back. And there's some other great leaders. Jose Antonio Cast in Chile is running for the presidency there, or will be. And we're just doing all we can to build up this movement to push back on communism everywhere in every corner of the globe.
The question might be asked, why Mexico? Why not stick the UK? I mean, what makes you want to reach out and take the same message of CPAC, all freedoms? What makes you want to take that to other countries like Mexico?
Well, a little bit is, you find a good partner. There's I always argue with conservatives on this stuff we tend to be very philosophical, and philosophically something might make sense and be the right thing to do, but you can't make it work logistically. So the life that God put us on this earth to live has to work logistically. It's just the way it is. So part of it is you find a good partner. It's the right time politically in that country. Everything just works. Other countries, we talk and talk and talk about doing it, but it doesn't seem to move forward. So finding that partner is a big part of it. There's a financial consideration. These things aren't cheap. You got to figure out there's a lot of complications to it. And I am still surprised that it goes as far and as wide as it does. And quite honestly, I'm having a board meeting this week, and we're going to find ways to make it go even further.
Come on. I want you back to discuss that. But I mean, kind of looking at politics in the UK, you've got kind of those 200, 300 people, maybe political ideas meet in a maybe a smoke, used to be smoky, but a small hall somewhere. Then you go to CPAC and you get that kind of American style, which I love, and love being at CPAC a year ago. And it's that it raises people's spirits. Sometimes I think in the UK or your political conferences, it's quite down, it's dour. But actually you go to CPAC and you go away thinking, I'm excited. And that seems to be a theme that runs through anywhere in CPAC, that enthusiasm.
Yeah, you're right. It feeds the soul. We're a social people, and we want to be with each other, and we want to be encouraged. And one of the things that we realize about socialism is it creates a lot of unhappy people. And people that believe in freedom, even when they would live their lives differently than their neighbor, they tend to be happier. And that's just a fact. So when you come to our events, they're not angry. They're not nasty. People are having fun. And I can't even imagine. I mean, I would say the Republican convention as opposed to the Democratic convention. I actually went to a Democratic convention in Philadelphia.
Wow.
It was a little bit weird, I have to say. It was kind of like, it would be like in your neighborhood, all the neighbors you think are sketchy and like a little strange left, a whole arena filled with them. And you're like, wow. And it's funny because even what they say on their T-shirts, it's kind of nasty. Like they're kind of mad, damn it, give me my abortion, kind of stuff. And our community is just so much different.
No, we were, I was just the March for Life annual demo in London just passed. And you're right, the difference, those actually desperately wanting to push something like abortion, and then those on the other side wanting the sanctity of life. And it's a world away, those two views. One is about destruction, one is about hope.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I love the pro-life movement. That's encouraging to hear that it's vibrant in the UK, because it gets disparaged, but it's the ultimate unselfish movement. Why would anybody in America, our big march in DC is in January, it's always bitter cold. And why would anybody take a day off to walk through the freezing cold of Washington, DC to speak up for a life that they'll probably never meet? That's a wonderful part of the selflessness of understanding constitutional order, which is you're fighting for the rights for people you might not even like. I mean, I fight for the rights of my neighbors who I hate, for them to put up the yard signs that I hate, but I'll fight to the death for their right to do that. They would never do that for me. Matter of fact, they'll put me in prison if I put up my Trump sign.
Tell me, in going to Mexico, obviously you've been in Mexico a couple of years. You've been in Brazil a couple of years. Very different. I mean, Brazil is nearly 50% of the population, I think, of South America, huge country. And you mentioned Bolsonaro was 4 years, and it seems though Javier Milei has taken on that role in Argentina, that role of freedom in South America. I mean, how do you see that? Because going to Mexico, it's governmentally and possibly media-wise, there is not that opening. Being in CPAC somewhere like Brazil or even over in Hungary, you've got an openness with the government. So how do you compare those? Because CPAC is needed as much in a dark country with the socialist government as it is to support a populist government on the right.
Yeah, so I was just at the Hungarian embassy last night. They took our Reagan at CPAC book and translated into Hungarian, and that's quite an honor. And you're right, it's more hospitable when we go to Hungary. But of course, everything could shift, and that could shift. I mean, the news media has it wrong. Viktor Orban has to stand for re-election regularly, and they've had moments when they thought those elections could be quite tight. He's had a heck of a track record of winning big. But we go to countries where it's hospitable, and we go to places like Hong Kong where it's the opposite of hospitable. We had a dinner with Jimmy Lai at his house. Jimmy Lai is this famous billionaire who's now in prison. We hope he's alive. My understanding is he is, and that people are in contact with him. But his house was firebombed right after we left, and so we got out of Hong Kong pretty fast. But we'll go everywhere to spread this message. And sometimes, my kids are praying for me because it's dangerous. And sometimes they come with me because it's a lot of fun. We don't really have one set model. The fact is this: people are fighting for freedom in all shapes, manners, and sizes on this globe. And if CPAC can lend a hand to that, we're just going to do it.
No, and it kind of seems to be the same message. I mean, we had Robert Malone on last week, and I know he was in CPAC Mexico, and you see kind of the same concepts wherever you go, the same narrative, but just a different process of working out. And do you find wherever you go, it's people want freedom of speech, they want sanctity of life in however they see it, and all those are built on biblical Christian values of family, the importance of family and looking after children. Do you see those themes running through wherever you go?
Well, it's funny because I just talked to Robert Malone. I think that's who you're referring to, who he and I, our farms in the mountains of Virginia are not far from each other, and we spend a lot of time with each other. And he and Jill are very special people. But we just talked on the phone the other day, and we say similar things, but I actually don't even know if he goes to church. And he said to me, "Are you Catholic?" And I was like, "Yes, I'm Catholic." And he was like, "Oh, I didn't even know." So like we have all these conversations, and we don't even ask each other that stuff because we're so in step, we're so in sync on basically what we want to see happen. And I think it's a beautiful thing because the world is such a dangerous place, and we've slid so much, and civilization is in such a catastrophic state that you can really see the good of people, even if they're churched or not churched, or maybe not as catechized as someone else. But if their hunch is right on the core 7 or 8 things, you just immediately start going to work together. You don't really ask all those other questions. Whereas 25 years ago, oh, are you a Methodist, or are you a Lutheran, or oh, this means this, and like things have gotten so bad that doesn't matter anymore. It's like, do you believe in the Bible or don't you believe in the Bible? Do you believe there's a higher power or don't you believe? Do you believe there's gender or there's no gender? Like, do you believe that like every abortion's a tragedy, or is abortion such a wonderful thing you want to have a tote bag and a pin that says abortion ! I mean, that's how crazy the world has gotten. So, I think that what happens, like in Asia, the countries we go to, some of them are Christian, some of them are not. The populations are overwhelmingly not Christian, but it's really the same themes. You're still talking about radical gender theory on kids. You're still talking about radical abortion rhetoric on the left, as if abortion were a good thing, and no regulations on abortion. Think about that. No regulations, even to make sure a woman is safe during the process. Like just no regulation on abortion, and of course, common sense people saying, well, hey, maybe we should start by saying, let's not have late term abortions, or maybe we shouldn't have abortions so that you can say, well, I wanted a girl and I'm having a boy, so I'm going to have an abortion. Like maybe we should say that's a bad idea. And and it's funny, you can tell the gender of a baby, but you can't tell the gender of a 7-year-old. I mean, that shows you the lunacy of the world that we're in. And so you take that to its fruition. I would say that whether we're in Korea or Japan or Brazil or Mexico or Hungary, or, I'm thinking of another country that we go to, Australia, no matter what it is, it's all the same themes because of the insanity of the left. And it's always the left pushing this idea that what has made civilization so strong should be destroyed. And they have a new concept of what would make us, I guess, a new civilization, which will be government dependent, which will be, this idea that you don't own stuff, you just kind of use it, or you just kind of rent it. And there's a scooter on the corner. Oh, good. I don't have to walk the next mile. I can get on a scooter. It's very feudal. It seems to me like we'd all be serfs. And that's their vision of what they want the world to be. Now, of course, in that world, the serfs will have masters or lords or whatever they called them back in the days. I'm trying to remember my high school history. And, they'll have all the money, and they'll have the big houses, and they'll drive the Teslas. And the rest of us will try to find scooters, and we'll live in things that we're told are very nice, but there will be no imagination left to life. Think about it. Your experience, my American experience, is I can really do and be whatever I want. Part of that is I can do a lot of perverted and evil things, but it's legal. And that's part of this idea of freedom, which is you can do things that are wrong. But the beautiful part of that is I can also take the talents God gave me and do anything. I could be an architect. I could be a carpenter. I could be a landscape designer. I could be a software designer. I can just do anything. And in this country, my sexual orientation, my skin color, my ethnic heritage, my religion, none of that stuff mattered when you went to go pursue these professional desires. And what we've done in our country now is we've got that all screwed up, which is you can only fulfill your professional desires if you think a certain way, if you don't have hate speech, if you'll use all the crazy pronouns that all your work colleagues expect you to use, like all of this craziness that any person from America 40 years ago would never have gone along with. You have to go along with to get ahead in that culture. And then if you're an entrepreneur or you're kind of a solo practitioner, in order to get insurance, in order to be banked, in order to get financing, you then have to go back and go through that crazy process. That is what this whole election is about in America. I know that takes a long time to get there, and I should figure out how to do that in 16 words. But that's what it's all coming down to, which is a majority of Americans know that this leftist, sad, communist, colorless, drab world they want us all to live focus myopically on race, right? And all the things that make you an aggrieved minority. That now is the dominant force in our country. It used to just be this weird fringe. They now run everything. If you don't go along with them, you're outside of the process and you will be canceled and you will be marginalized. If you're a straight male Christian kid in America, you're not going to get into an Ivy League school unless you're like incredibly exceptional. You're not going to get that management job in the company if your Christian faith or Jewish faith is too prominent on your social media or whatever. So we're creating these kind of like emotional and intellectual eunuchs, these vanilla people who have no opinions and won't express any opinions. There's no outward signs of anything that like their hobbies or their avocations besides like maybe a BLM pin. And, and so that's how you get ahead in our society, which is you have to conform. Well, that has nothing to do with the American experience. And you know this because we know our history together. The Americans were those upstarts that told, their rulers that they were breaking away. And that was an audacious thing. You might have your opinion as to whether that was a good thing. I have my opinion as to whether or not that was a good thing. But you can't deny that it was an audacious, semi-crazy idea that they were going to break away and then try to take on, the British military, which was the best in the world. So America was created by people. The whole concept of America was created by people, mostly British. So this is really a huge compliment to your country, that were well-bred and well-educated and had good character. And then they had this idea that we're going to do this crazy thing and separate. And now in America, we get 250 years later, we have to be the conformists. We have to do everything Klaus Schwab says. We must do what George Soros says. We must put our textbooks and have them approved by the globalists before they hit our textbooks. And the UN will have a larger role than a mom or a dad. Like, this is the insanity. Everything they want to do in my country is the exact opposite of that spark of 1775 and 1776, when we did this audacious thing that said, hey, we're going to be independent. And by the way, when we were independent, and it really wasn't an independence movement against their cousins in the UK, as you know. I mean, this was heartbreaking for a lot of them. It was this idea of whether or not you have a king, and the king, dominates your life. And so it was kind of one of the first moments on the face of the earth where people said, no, we don't really need to have a king, that the people will be king. And now the UK has the same government as we do, and the people are king. And that's a really special thing, and we're screwing it all up.
Well, you have, and you've taken that American dream, and now the left, they tell you to follow the signs. They don't even know what a woman is, and it's just utter confusion, utter lack of any basic understandings. But this American dream, which actually there's no other country in the world, you talk about the dream of a nation, the American dream, that's unique. That concept is unique, and that's worked very well. And now it seems to have this huge opposition to the left. And that's why I certainly see this election as, certainly in my time following politics and growing up, I've never seen an election which I think is as influential and important and such a milestone, not only in the US, but actually worldwide. And I don't think that's hyperbole. I think actually this is one of the most important elections for generations. I mean, am I well off the mark?
Oh, I think you're right. I mean, I'm kind of sad about this piece, Peter, which is, it's sad that 50% of my country, or I would say just under 50% of my country, hates the whole concept of America. They just think it's old-fashioned, and they want to rip it up and start over again. And that's essentially what you're doing if you vote for Kamala Harris. You're saying, look, our institutions, they need to be more woke. She even said that in an interview the other day. We need more woke, not less woke. We need more affirmative action towards aggrieved minorities, not less of it. They'll never let us outlive slavery. I mean, UK, all the civilized world, the whole world has had slavery forever. It's in the Bible. Slavery has always been one group of people dominated another group of people. A lot of times it was on race. Sometimes it was just on other things. One person had the power, one person didn't. One group had the power, one person didn't. In the American experience of slavery is a lot of black people enslaved a lot of black people. So it wasn't just about a white-black thing. But my God, when are we going to let ourselves move forward? We're talking about generations and generations and generations ago. And look, I'm a Republican, and I love the Wilberforce story. The Republican Party was created primarily to get rid of this birth defect, this stain on our country. And now the Democratic Party, the party of Jim Crow and the party of slavery and the party of segregation and the party of Dred Scott and the party of yada, yada, yada. They lecture me and people like me on a daily basis about how we're racist. Our whole political movement was on getting rid of slavery. Now, we also were more free market people, less government dependency people. So over time, we wanted to say to all minorities, look, we'll give you a shot. We'll make sure the laws are fair and transparent, but then you got to succeed on your own. And what the Democrats want is they want a dependency class. They want people that feel like they can't succeed on their own, which is why they want more and more and more illegal immigration. They love this idea of kind of like a semi-educated mass of people that have to listen to the donkey for everything. And the donkey says, we'll get you all your money and we'll make sure you have health care. And so you can live in this kind of like maybe a little bit better from the country that you come from situation, but nothing great. And the Republican Party rejects that. The Republican Party is the party that defeated slavery. The Republican Party is the party that gave women the right to vote. The Republican Party is the party that believes in religious minorities. We believe in all of this. But by the same token, eventually we get to a point where you got to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. And, we get told that that's now racist. It's not. It's an expectation that, like, if you're going to hire someone for a job, the white kid, the Hispanic kid, the Asian kid, whatever, the gay kid, the straight kid, whatever, you just want to pick the guy, the young man or woman who's going to do a great job. And why do you have to go to court for years and years and spend millions of dollars to re-adjudicate every personnel decision you make, whether it's on the hiring side or the firing side? We're just so broken. And it's gotten to the point where if you talk to anybody trying to do a great thing in our economy, it's very hard because all of these legal questions intervene on everything. And in the end, that makes everything very expensive. One of the things we don't talk about, one of the reasons why our expenses here are going crazy is because wokeism is really expensive. Because wokeism means that you have constant settlements to people in these aggrieved parties. The lawyers are involved in every decision you make. We're going to move this guy's desk from here to there. Oh my God, you did it because I'm a minority. You did it because I'm LGBTQ, whatever. And now you're off to court. And then what happens in these big blue cities in America is that if you have my politics, you're going to lose in all those jurisdictions. Look at Donald Trump. He was accused of essentially, sexually attacking a woman who couldn't remember the year in which it occurred, right? Think of the silliness of that. Like, there was a point in America where if you were going to bring charges against somebody, you at least had to have a couple of facts. Now you just have to have hurt feelings and you'll win. So this is all the stuff that if we're to succeed and to continue, it has to be unwound. The only way it can be unwound, it won't be bipartisan because the Democratic Party is all for it. It means Republicans have to win. It starts by winning in very tight elections and then changing those rules back to what they should be, back to what the Constitution says. Then I think the Republican Party or a version of it could have great success in this country.
How does the non-white vote, if you look at the black vote, Hispanic vote, you saw that rising in 2016, 2020. And generally, those groupings will be more conservative, generally with a Christian ethos in their culture, and therefore really should be more likely to vote for someone on the right, for President Trump. And yet we see in America, as we see in Europe, actually, often it's the parties on the left that capture that. But Do you think that the 2016-2020 change that we saw in those voter intentions, I mean, there's nothing that Kamala Harris offers for anyone who's socially conservative or anyone who's come into the country and then second, third generation who doesn't want people to freeload and come in for free whenever they've worked hard. Do you think all those will come into the mix and actually there should be a continued increase in support from Trump from those groupings?
So, I mean, there's a really interesting dynamic here, which is in the old days, we had this concept of melting pot. You come to America and you become like everyone else. You learn the language, you might keep your customs and your food and everything like that. But you know, there's an American way of life, and that's kind of been destroyed. And now we encourage everyone to kind of be what they are, except when it comes to faith. So the thing that's the most important part of America was always this place where you could come and have religious freedom. It's one of the most important parts of the American experience. Now, we were overwhelmingly Christian, but also accepting of people of other faiths and no faith, you know, agnostics, atheists. And what's happened is the opposite, which is we say, yeah, keep your clothing, keep your food habits, keep your, you know, we have Haitians on the street in America that are killing our cats and dogs and eating them for dinner, like, and liberals are saying, hey, well, that's how they like to do things. So I guess that's fine. But if they have traditional views on faith, on gender, on marriage, on life, on these things, that's actually not acceptable from these people. So there's a war on faith in this country. As we know, the globalist crowd are not religious people. They're hostile to religion. And so what I'm noticing, and what my wife, whose family comes from Cuba, is noticing is that where you're getting these people, it's not on free market economics. It's not that we should get rid of the welfare state. That was always unpopular with new Americans who are darker skinned. But what we're noticing is that they go to church. They want their boys to be boys. They want their girls to grow up and marry strong men. And they want their girls to be able to compete in sports. It's all those questions, this radicalism on abortion, et cetera, et cetera. It's all those questions that have gotten the attention of Blacks and Hispanics. The other thing is what they're beginning to catch on to more and more is that those who are accusing Donald Trump of being a racist, for instance, are the ones that are making their lives harder. They're the ones that are hassling them because they're a teacher and they don't want to use the pronouns, or they're a coach and they want the girls to compete against girls, and they realize the insanity of that. You know, most of the Hispanics in this country, in my country, they fled communism. Now they're seeing America embrace communism, and they don't like that. They know the downside of communism. They have already lived through that. So we do have a real opportunity here. And, you know, Donald Trump has the luxury of being able to point to his time as president when these groups did better than in previous Democrat administrations.
So elections, as if I can make a comment as a Brit or as an Irish or as a foreigner, take it however you want it. But I mean, I can look at how the US conducts elections. It does seem to be a recipe for disaster in many ways, in terms of paper ballots, in terms of drop boxes, in terms of the amount of money put in on ads.
Peter, can I ask you a question on that?
Yeah.
So Europe just did EU-wide elections. I don't know how many countries that is. Is it over 30?
27, maybe.
27.
28, 27.
Okay, so right around 30 countries, you have elections. Everyone has their own rules in their countries. They have their elections on different dates, but it's mostly similar. And you all find out the answers on election day. And then the only complication... Within hours. I said before, the baguettes are in the oven baking, you know who the winners are, like in France and these other countries. Yeah. And I didn't read anything about widespread voter machine malfunction. I didn't read anything about a judge intervened at the last minute to change the election laws. I didn't read anything about how a judge said you had to keep a bunch of illegal people on the ballots. I didn't read a bunch of stuff about how all the illegal migrants are allowed to vote in this country. Like, I didn't read any of that. Now, I know you have real migration problems, which you're on the cusp of issues there, but you seem to conduct a continent-wide election. And then the only complication is who wants to join which party in a coalition.
And that's 500 million people. It's a lot.
That's a lot. Is that what it is?
Yes, for the EU.
And am I right? There was no real controversies about the process. I mean, lots of controversies about the candidates, but not about the way you pick them.
There is never any public controversy. There's frustration at maybe some of the systems used or some of the advertising or promotion. But no, at the end of the day, there is no disagreement. And you go to bed at night, the polls close at 9 p.m., and you wake up at 7 a.m. and 95% of the votes are counted, if not 100%.
And do you have conversations about how if you follow the election laws, you're trying to harm people racially? That's all we talk about in America, which is all the laws that Republicans want to follow. When you want to follow the law, it's because you're trying to suppress a black person from voting. You guys don't even have that debate.
No, it would be a strange concept if a commentator was on TV discussing that. He wouldn't be understood. He would be laughed out.
And in the 27 countries where you have these 28 countries where you had the EU elections, my guess is every single one of those at some point had legalized slavery.
Yeah.
And so you have the same issue with pulling people from Africa into your countries to with this moral stain of slavery, but you seem to have gotten beyond it. Now you realize, oh, we want to elect a member to the European Parliament. Let's try to find the most efficient way to do that. So you don't vote over 30 days. You don't put boxes willy-nilly on streets that are not observed. So because it's racist to ask someone to put a stamp on a ballot and be organized enough to turn it in so that it gets there before election day so it gets counted, because it's racist to demand anything other than to demand that they follow those rules. So we have no stamps. We have boxes all over the place. We have some places 30 days to cast your ballot. We have made every excuse so that election officials don't have to have the answer on election night, because it's so complicated to count half as many ballots as what you just counted in Europe, that they need sometimes days and weeks to figure out what happened. Now you have a Supreme Court, I think it's in Pennsylvania, saying that you can essentially vote after Election Day, that you don't have to have any postmark that says, oh, I voted on Election Day or before. You don't, like, having a postmark is now illegal because that's racist. So, like, this means that, like, if you have a left-wing machine, and there is a left-wing machine in America, it's called the unions. The teachers union are the biggest part of that. And they can know what the difference is between their preferred candidate and my preferred candidate. And they can essentially vote after Election Day in some of these jurisdictions because the laws are so loose. You don't have any of that in Europe.
No, and we accept that if you're a black person and you get on a flight, you show your passport to fly. Why shouldn't it be the same for voting? That concept is accepted across the board in every area. And yet, supposedly, this weird conversation about how dare you have that because it's racist. And that seems to come up again and again by the Democrats in the States.
Well, we have CPAC wants to monitor these boxes across our country because we believe that's how democracy, that's how you lose it. Even Jimmy Carter went all over this world and said, I demand to go in and watch the voting. I want to see the process. I want to see how it's counted. And I don't like very much about Jimmy Carter, but I respected this part of him, which is if there's no transparency in a democracy, you don't have a free vote. And what we're doing in America is larger and larger percentages of Americans are dubious about the outcome because they can't watch it. They should be able to go on their computer or their phone and see the streaming video. They should be able to show up at the election office and watch the counting. They should be able to raise objections if they see laws being broken. And there's going to be laws broken in every process. And you got to have, a transparent process to do that. In America, when we raise these questions, these leftists run to the Washington Post and say that we're trying to suppress blacks from voting. The danger is that they have a lot of power and they could come after us for saying simply observing the vote is an attempt to intimidate the vote. Now, when you have these European elections all over the place, I assume it wasn't just like 5 people with a special badge that get to watch the process. There must be some kind of transparency to it, which is one of the reasons everyone accepts the results, even when they lose.
Yeah, I've been a ballot watcher, a poll watcher, and if you're a member of a political party, you can put your name forward, and you can have 3 or 4 from each party on each counting area. So it's fully transparent, and everyone sees, and you can question anything and ask them to recount. But they're poll watchers from every party. It's all convivial. Everyone's very pleasant. There's no kind of the animosity you kind of would expect maybe when you've got a Republican Democrat, but we don't have that. It's actually a fun evening, and everyone is happy with the result at the end, and the results are done at 7 p.m. and a new government is announced. So you may be annoyed at the results, but you know the results going in, putting an X on a bit of paper, and those being counted. And the rush is to count those the quickest. So you have regions in the UK up north, Newcastle are usually one of the first regions to count, and there's a race to get the first ones in. In America, the race seems to be the last one gets the medal. So 4 months later, Arizona might come in with a vote saying, hey, well done, you've won because you're last. It's a weird concept.
Yeah, in our country, the most corrupt cities in the purple states, the states that are, up for grabs, they always report last. Now, why would you want to report last? Like, why would you always want to be last? Well, they report last because there's a lot of fraud in those results, and they're trying to ascertain how far they're behind. So all those jurisdictions that stopped voting at 3 o'clock in the morning in the last election were all coming from very corrupt cities. By the way, it's run by one party. There's no other parties. It's just one party. In your country, in our country, the left is basically organized under the Democratic Party. So even on the left, there's not a lot of divisions. So they're all together. So it's just the left versus the right, and they run the big city. They have the judges are coming from their party, and the judges rule that you don't have to follow the law on voter ID. You don't have to follow the law on when the polls close. You don't have to follow any law. And so we're off to the races. And, democracy is just not going to survive under that type of situation. Now, look, what I'm saying is controversial in my own country. I get attacked for saying these things, but how do I not speak up when I've seen this wrongdoing? How do I not speak up about it? And what even my own party wants to do is say, look, yes, they cheat a lot. The Democrats cheat a lot, but we just have to overcome it. We have to overcome it by winning by bigger percentages. Where they're completely wrong is you get to a point where you can't. And then when you can't overcome their cheating, then like what we saw in 2020, they've become so radicalized because they know they got away with cheating. And now they're like, we can do the same thing on education policy. We can do the same thing on all these social policies. And we can do the same thing. The saddest thing is they now think they can do it out of the Department of Justice, the center of justice in our country. They think they can pervert that to jail their most likely political opponent in the name of Donald Trump. But Donald Trump's just the first experience of this. If they're successful this election in winning, I think all of us who have this point of view, run nonprofits, all the Elon Musks of the world, the Tucker Carlsons, they're all at risk for having the Department of Justice go after them for hate speech or inciting violence or being an election denier. I mean, this terminology gets used in Brazil. It gets used in these global efforts in all of these countries. And it's incredibly dangerous. It all starts in America with a win in November. Quite honestly, if they're able to cheat enough where we can't win in November, it's kind of over. And then the sad thing is a lot of Americans have to ask themselves, like, do they stay? Do they move? Do they fight harder? You have to kind of recalibrate. But Kamala Harris is on record saying that she's going to use the DOJ to go after anybody who's involved with fomenting hate. Well, I'm afraid I would qualify under that definition of her perverted definition. I think a lot of good Americans would, millions would. Now we have a Gestapo country where you get run into a prison camp if you have the wrong politics or the wrong religious views. You believe in gender. You believe in family. You believe in the Constitution. That's how dangerous this all is. I think, it's not just about America, although that's kind of what I focus on, being a patriotic American, but it's this whole concept of civilization. Are we going to have a civilization? That whole civilization was based on family, based on a liberal understanding of education, where your mind was open and there was a discourse. But a part of that, there was no my truth, there was just truth. As soon as we perverted the idea of truth to everyone has their version of the truth, well, then really, how do you have a law or a constitution? because everyone gets to determine what truth is. And the left is so crazy, they can change their mind on truth. Look at Kamala Harris's whole campaign. Changes her mind all the time and says, I have the same values I always had, but she's all over the place on policy because they don't believe in truth. They believe in, what do I need to do to get power? Boy, if that's rewarded in this country, I don't know. I'm going to be, don't call me on Wednesday. Of course, we won't have the results for a few weeks because we're so incompetent and corrupt. But a few weeks after Tuesday, when we know the winner, don't call me if we lost, because I'm going to have to figure out a way to talk myself into re-engaging in politics.
No, I get you. Can I just a last thought on, you mentioned Musk, and that seems to be a game changer in terms of the dissemination of information and the free dissemination of information. And that interview with President Trump was huge. And during different elections, you've seen Fox News has kind of dropped down, Newsmax has risen up, but then you've got all these different shows, alternative media all over, and that's one of the reasons why Steve Bannon is in jail, because he is such a threat with War Room. I mean, how does that all play in?
How does it all end?
How does it play into the election? Because this spread of information, this is what the left fear, this free information.
So did you read, Peter, that the judge in New York said he wasn't going to sentence Trump until after the election?
Yes.
Do you think he did that because he's trying to follow the law? I think he did it because he knows that if he had sentenced Donald Trump in the way that he intends to sentence him, he would send him to jail, and that would have a negative impact on Kamala Harris's political situation. The fact is, the lawfare, as painful as it's been for Donald Trump, as unjust as it's been, as painful as it's been for all of us who have had to go through this, it didn't work. And that's why they're pulling back. They know that it looks raw and desperate and illegal what they're doing. So they're pulling back. Now the question is, if she wins, will they keep pulling back, or will they go forward again? And this radicalized Democratic Party, I know that's embraced Marxism, they always go forward very aggressively. So I would look, if she were to win, I think they're going to be very, very aggressive in using their police power to shut more people down like Steve Bannon. And then the question will be, how much longer is this kind of a peaceful political debate in this country? And I don't want to wave the flag for encouraging people to do anything violent, but the left has to be careful. One of the consequences of depriving people of their rights is eventually they get mad. And we've got to figure out a way to get back to this idea where you get to say your piece, I get to say my piece. I'll defend to the death your right to have your views. You'll defend to the right for the ability to have my views. We'll have an election that's really uncontested, and then we'll have a winner. By the way, if we followed all the rules in America and the media was fair and they weren't doing election interference with their coverage every night, which is 95% positive for Harris and 3%, 2% positive for Trump, and whatever's left over is mediocre, one side to the other, my side would win all these races. It's all this other stuff that intervenes, the social media bias, the media bias, the judicial bias, all that stuff. You know, Hunter's laptop is misinformation. Vladimir Putin is spending a ton of money to get Donald Trump elected president. All these fallacies, if they weren't perpetrated, and I think they're crimes, we'd win all these races. And the reason they do all this stuff is because they don't want us to win any of these races. So that's why they do it all. And we've got to somehow encourage more journalism that you're talking about that is at least fair. I don't even like my side when it's like not fair. Like, I want to be fair because we fight each other too. Like, I think there should be a certain fairness. There should have facts. But how do you have facts when you don't have truth? There's no facts. It's just a question of how you can propagandize pieces of information, move data around. And that's unfortunately where my country is.
Oh, I agree. Well, the viewers and listeners, obviously, CPAC.org, make sure and plug into there for all the latest, and follow Matt and CPAC on X. Matt, I appreciate your time on the day of this crazy debate that we're going to have, and I will get it in the morning, so I'll not be staying up until the crack
I'm getting
of
on
dawn.
a train. I'm getting on a train. I'm going to New York City, where I'm going to dodge criminals, illegal immigrants, drugs, and do commentary from New York City. And I think Donald Trump's going to have a great night. And then the media the next morning will say Kamala Harris had a great night. And that's the world in which I live.
There's no better to be. I've watched all different speeches of President Trump, and it's fun, it's joyful, and he's relaxed and enjoys the process, where Kamala can't even enjoy the sound of her own voice, never mind the process. But, Matt, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Peter. Take care.